People are here for some reason. All right, final warning. I'm going to say this for the last time. This panel, we did it somewhere else. I forget where. It's already on YouTube. And we're going to record this and put it on YouTube. You're at MAGFest. You could spend your next hour in an arcade, with a pinball, at a concert, playing a game.
Bop.
You don't have to spend that hour here. You can leave now or at any time, and we won't care. Okay. Oh, you want to? Oh, I think that one's off.
No, this one's the one. You turn on these two. I watched you do it.
Okay, sure.
I watched you do it, so I got to stand here now.
That means I got to go like this. Yeah. Okay.
Still got like 5 minutes before the panel.
All right. Who came the farthest to be with us here today? We're from New York City. Who's from further away?
Then Queens.
Where are you from? Boston?
Boston.
That's further away. Anyone farther than Boston? Chicago is further away than Boston.
Let's see. I've been to Chicago only ever to go to Anime Central on 3 non-consecutive occasions. We go to Boston for PAX East every year.
I will say, at PAX, the people are coming from far away foreign countries. They should be coming from MAGFest. But maybe I think people in the other countries don't know about MAGFest.
I mean, MAGFest sells out, so don't tell anyone.
But now that makes me wonder, are those other countries, do they have MAGFests I don't know about?
They do not, I don't think. They have music festivals.
If there's a MAGFest in like in Europe or Africa or something, I gotta go.
There are the LARP conferences in Europe.
All right.
I want to go to one at some point.
All right. Who has been?
Oh, you know what? This is the tabletop room. Who has played the longest single tabletop game that was completed in one session?
Right. We're not talking about a campaign. We're talking about you sat down, you know, like a Twilight Imperium or something like that.
14 hours.
14 hours. I never played anything. I never played anything 14 hours.
We played a diplomacy. For once ever, we played diplomacy. Because it's not the best game. It's a great concept. It's not that fun of a game. 5 hours later, 5-way draw, and I'm never playing that game
We agreed.
again.
We're like, we're had enough of this. Okay, the end.
Because the rules of diplomacy are, if one country is the last country standing, they win. Or, if all remaining players vote unanimously, then the game is a draw among the remaining players, and everyone else loses. So you can only win by being the last team standing.
Anyway,
who's
been to the most MAGFests? I've been.
At the end of a year in diplomacy, one country controls the majority.
Yeah, there's the majority control.
Yeah, they win.
We only played it a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Who's been to the most MAGFests?
15, 20, 25? There haven't been 30.
I don't know how many there have been. I don't know how many I've been to.
Has anyone here been to a MAGFest that was not in this building? Yes.
Yes.
Back when it was that one tiny hotel.
Was it the one with the elevator party in the? Yes. We were there somehow.
I remember that MAGFest, like first MAGFest we ever been to. Didn't know what was going on. We show up, used to like PAXes and these other kinds of cons, and the Colossus Roar is like already a thing, and like we're experiencing this, but we're leaving the con because we couldn't even get a room in the hotel. We're like staying at this other hotel. We have to take a shuttle, and it's in the middle of nowhere. So we're walking out of the hotel at like 2 a.m. And there's darkness and woods like off to the side. And in the convention, while the door is open, the Colossus Roar happens. And then out in the woods, we hear a lone voice make the Colossus roar.
That did happen. That's not a made-up one like usual.
So we've been doing a bunch of stuff at this MAGFest. Some of you know who we are. I recognize some of you. Some of you really don't know who we are.
Who knows who we are? Okay, all right.
So those of you who didn't raise your hands might about to be really disappointed for the next hour. But if you enjoy anything that happens in this room over the next hour, what I will say is, one, we did 2 other talks so far at this MAGFest. They're going to be on YouTube. We're giving one more talk, myself and a different person, Emily there, on Saturday. But you should take one of these flyers because we've been podcasting for over 20 years. We have literally like 70 or 80 of our talks on YouTube, thousands of episodes of our podcast on YouTube. So if you enjoy any of this, take this flyer and you can find out how to get all that for free because we don't sell anything. But simultaneously, if you do not enjoy what happens in this room, take one of these flyers anyway. So MAGFest stops bringing us back.
Right. Okay.
Still got a minute to kill.
In
Then we
1
can get
minute,
going.
I will do a final hour of work to earn my free badge.
I have to do one more hour, but
You
I will
suckers
say.
all paid for your badges. You could have just talked for an hour and gotten a free one. How easy is that?
So the talk we're doing tomorrow is different because last year Emily and I gave a talk on this art movement we think is emerging in the world that is postmodern and is kind of uniquely being catalyzed by the existence of video games, which didn't exist until relatively recently. And that panel was packed last year. This year, we are doing a much deeper dive on this thing we're calling metacontextuality, which is a postmodern movement that we think exists. All right, now we're going to pretend none of that happened. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
We are the hosts of Geek Nights, and we are here today to dive deep into tabletop game mechanics. I hope some of you play tabletop board games. You're in the tabletop panel room at MAGFest, a convention where there are concerts happening simultaneously. You're not going to a concert. You have come to a whole other building, to a room dedicated to this, to hear us talk about tabletop game mechanics.
You must care about tabletop games somehow if you're still sitting here.
I hope you do. So, normally, if you go to a con, you're going to see some people at the stage, and they're going to have this whole bit about what is a game mechanic. And they're going to spend an hour talking about baby's first 101. Every talk is like this at every con.
And they're going to have all kinds of semantic arguments,
Yeah.
like what is a game, what is a mechanic, oh my God.
We're not playing that game today. That is a silly conversation to have. You all know what a game mechanic is, and I'm going to prove it to you. Wikipedia doesn't know what a game mechanic is, but you do. That is what Wikipedia says a game mechanic is. That is not a useful definition. So, I'm going to just say something simple. Everything on that list is a game mechanic. I think we can all agree. And to prove this, we're going to look at one more game mechanic, worker placement. I want to play a little game with all of you. Is the thing we are looking at a worker placement game, meaning the mechanic of worker placement is in this game?
It will be funny to see if my opinion changes versus the last time we did this panel.
That will be really funny.
I'll just go with my gut about what I feel about each game.
This is only the second time we've done this. Though we did give an hour-long talk at PAX last year entirely on worker placement games. So, game one, Kalis.
A lot of people say this is the first worker placement game. We're not 100% sure on that, but it's definitely one of the first ones.
If this is not the first worker placement game, then a game called Bus is the first worker placement game. Say you don't know anything about
the
Kalis.
first one that was published widely that people know about that you
So
could
you don't know how
buy.
that game works, but we just said it's the first worker placement game, but I point out on that slide, there's a bunch of little tiles with stuff on them, and there's little people-shaped things that are sitting on those tiles. I'm just going to say that's a worker placement game, and we can move on. About Lords of Waterdeep. Now, let's say you've never played Lords of Waterdeep. Let's look at Lords of Waterdeep. What's going on there?
You
What are those
put
little guys?
You put little guys on cards, and whichever card you choose does a thing.
Who raise your hand if you think Lords of Waterdeep is a worker placement game?
Yeah,
Yeah, obviously.
Probably, yeah, okay.
All right. Agricola. Agricola is a game where you're going to put little guys, little discs, on those spaces, and those spaces are going to activate and do things for you. You have a limited number of these little tokens that you put out. It's a worker placement game. We don't need to play that one. This is the one I want to play with you. Othello, or Reversi if you named it wrong.
Iago.
If you've really named it wrong. Is Othello a worker placement game? Raise your hand if you think it is.
No, but some people think that they're going to outsmart the.
It is not a worker placement game. My argument is that this is a game. It's an abstract game. You're placing things on a board, but placing the thing on the board is the intrinsic action. It does not bring something back. It does not influence the game in any other way except occupying a space in an otherwise symmetric game. This is the hard one. Is Carcassonne, many of you have played Carcassonne. I see someone trying to warn people. Raise your hand if you would say that Carcassonne is a worker placement game. All right, it's not.
No.
It's not, obviously. Now, the reason it's not a worker placement game here is because you are the only thing you are collecting with those workers, when you put them down on the board, are victory points at the end of the game. Meaning, I could frame this as many other kinds of game mechanics that are mathematically identical, and it would function the exact same way.
Right, you can't be fooled by the actual bits. Just because it's a meeple that looks like a worker and it goes onto a place doesn't necessarily mean it's the same mechanic as worker placement.
Now, if you could spend victory points in Carcassonne to do other things, then you'd have an argument that's a worker placement game.
Maybe, but the playing of the meeples wouldn't even be the worker placement. The spending of the victory points would be the worker placement.
It wouldn't be.
Yeah.
All right, here's a tricky one. Game called Puerto Rico with an unfortunate theme. But Puerto Rico, you are choosing every round one of those roles to play, and then all the other people at the table get to do the same role, but they don't do it as well as you did it. If you pick the captain, you get to like super captain, and then everyone else just does like regular captain.
There's no meeples to put on the cards. You take the card.
Now, this is the tricky one. Now, raise your hand if you think this is a worker placement game. Me. All right, you're actually close.
I think it is.
Well, it is not.
I think you're wrong.
There's an asterisk. If you go to Board Game Geek, they point out that worker placement is mathematically a stylized form of action drafting, and they categorize this as an action drafting game.
This is an action drafting game, but just because you style it with a meeple versus not a meeple, you're going to say that that's the line?
And that's why we're not going to get into some fiddly definition of what a game mechanic is. Because the reality is, it's really messy. And depending on how you engage with the game, your definition of what a game mechanic is probably going to change. These overlap heavily. And none of it is relevant to how you play games. Because you all know that everything we had on that list before were game mechanics. You are chunking these ideas together in your brain, and you have a rough idea of how to engage with them. It just so happens that action drafting and worker placement are mathematically between 99 and 100% identical. The only difference is how the pieces are arranged and how you think about them.
Right. There's no, for a lot of things like languages, they'll be like, I know like for the Spanish language in Spain, there's like a royal society that decides what official Spanish is. We don't have anything of that for board games, right? It's like Board Game Geek just lets you make as many categories as you want. There's no one adjudicating this or saying what's right and wrong. It's just, you could argue the semantics forever, right? What matters is, does it actually matter when you're playing the game, right? The difference between an action draft and a worker placement. We just need to use some words so you understand what the hell we're saying.
So, Richard Garfield, you may have heard of him. He designed this like card game back in the 90s that some of you might have played. But in his book, Characteristics of Games, which I highly recommend if you have not read it, you all read it. Because 88%, 89%, 90% of everything we say, we're just saying things that we read in that book. But it is a seminal, foundational game design book focused on tabletop. And he makes a very strong argument in the beginning with definitions that nerds like to argue about definitions, and that when you're having a practical conversation, you should be descriptive rather than prescriptive. A prescriptive discussion here, we would have very formal definitions of game. We'd get into the math in much more detail. We would define the terms for you and then engage around those definitions. We are instead going to be descriptive. We are going to describe how game mechanics behave, and then from there, try to understand what they're doing. Going from descriptive to prescriptive is easier for normal people to do, and it's a more practical way to have a meaningful conversation and engage with complex topics.
And we're not writing law, we're not writing academic papers, so we don't need to waste our time. This is just MAGFest, who cares?
Yep. So, the easiest way to understand what game mechanics really are is to look at games that consist of just one game mechanic.
Right. Most of the tabletop games you play out there are a mixture of a bunch of mechanics, right? Because that's what makes them fun. All these sort of interacting systems where each system has a bunch of components. But if you look at a game, a really simple game with just one mechanic, then you can get a bigger understanding, right, of what's going on.
We figured out the quantum world partly by just studying hydrogen. It was really simple. Hydrogen's a really simple atom. Yahtzee is possibly one of the best games to use for this. Has anyone here played Yahtzee? You've played this game before?
Yeah, good. Okay, we know how to play Yahtzee.
We've been at other cons where people have not played Yahtzee. So you played Yahtzee. If you haven't, follow us along. Yahtzee is a fun game. I think it's worth playing. Yahtzee, let's talk about the game mechanics of Yahtzee. If a game mechanic is just a set of procedures that are causing a series of tests to occur, meaning I follow some rules, and then based on those rules, there's going to be an uncertain outcome that becomes certain. Something happens that impacts the game. We have a series of inputs, what I do before that test. We have a series of outputs, what happens as a result of those tests. Then Yahtzee is a very, very, very simple game. I roll 5 6-sided dice, I choose how many I want to lock, I do it again 2 more times. What am I testing? The only uncertain outcome, what will I roll when I re-roll the dice?
You're testing the luck of the dice, what comes up, right? Because somebody could just be super lucky and roll like 5 6s every time. It's possible, I guess.
Yep.
And you're also testing the player's ability to choose which spot on the score sheet is optimal for the roll that they have gotten.
Yep. So if we just make up a really simple definition to use for these purposes, if we describe a game mechanic as a series of procedures that facilitate a series of tests that have some inputs and outputs that cyclically resolve the game, then Yahtzee is just a mechanic that also is a game. Whoever wins Yahtzee is arguably the person who is best at manipulating that single game mechanic. So what is Yahtzee testing then? If Yahtzee is a game mechanic, what is that game mechanic testing? How do I be better at Yahtzee? How am I worse at Yahtzee? What determines who wins if Scott and I play Yahtzee?
Well, you can pray to the gods and donate to the Danny DeVito shrine and hope that the dice show up all 6s every time. That's one way that you could win at Yahtzee.
Or you can be slightly good at basic statistical math.
Yeah, if somebody is not good at math and they play Yahtzee, even if they just have extreme luck, you can't beat them. But if you have the same luck as the other players, which will happen over the course of multiple Yahtzee games, then somebody who understands math will do better at Yahtzee and win more often because presumably the other players will make poor choices and put their scores in the wrong spots and get less points.
So knowing basic math is almost a ticket to the table of having a chance to win, and beyond that, it's pretty much random. And that is what a Yahtzee mechanic will bring to a game. It will test your combination of are you good at math and are you lucky? Now, the tricky part about Yahtzee is that you might think about, dice probability. Everyone who plays games, who plays Settlers of Catan, even if you were bad at math, you instinctively and intuitively know the odds of rolling 2 6-sided dice. That's just something that gamers have internalized. That's like a unit in your brain. It just happens.
Even if you don't know the exact odds, right? You know that it's harder to roll 12 or snake eyes than it is to roll 7.
Yep.
Right? You might not know exactly how much harder, but you can just feel that it's going to happen less.
But Yahtzee as a mechanic can be fine-tuned. 2d6 has a probability curve, but as you increase the number of dice you roll, that curve gets tighter and tighter and tighter, taller and taller in the middle. It becomes a very different mathematical function. However, these trivial, simple odds don't actually help you that much. Because Yahtzee doesn't care about the number that you rolled. Yahtzee cares about the 2 individual dice.
The 5 individual dice.
The 5 individual dice.
It does matter if you're scoring chance, which
Yeah.
you get to score once per game, but otherwise it doesn't matter.
Yahtzee actually, for as simple as it is way more complex statistically than we might have implied. Because of that. That score sheet is unique. That score sheet makes the game really complex. You're thinking about the odds of fulfilling something on that sheet in exclusion of filling something else out on that sheet. You are looping through that sheet while rolling dice.
And it's not just what are the odds of me being able to score one of these things, but how many points do I get for choosing this versus that, right? It's like, okay, I rolled this. It could go 3 of a kind, but it could also be 3 3s. If I go 3 of a kind, it's actually more points. Maybe I rolled 3 3s and 2 6s. I guess you could do full house as well, right?
Could do full house.
But, it's like, okay, well, I could score that full house or 3 of a kind or 3 3s. Which one is the best option, right?
So the odds of Yahtzee, there's a website you can look at. If you look at every different thing you could roll on that sheet, they all have a different probability curve of how many rolls it would take and what percentage chance you have of achieving that goal in that set of rolls. And that is a system you are engaging with. Yet, a lot of you played Yahtzee. And I bet because you're at MAGFest in this room, you're probably pretty good at Yahtzee compared to like the random family members you might
If you're not good at Yahtzee, get good at it.
But you can be really good at Yahtzee without actually knowing all these odds.
I don't know them.
And yet we know we can play Yahtzee perfectly. We've proven it before.
Close enough.
We can play it as perfectly as you can play it. So I'm going to show you something cool. That is the probability curve of Yahtzee. ultimately. That is, if you look at Yahtzee as a game mechanic, all you are doing, the Yahtzee mechanic, is giving a player that probability curve and asking them to make decisions based on where they sit on that probability curve and how much time they have left. That is the odds of getting any particular
Timed
score
Yahtzee,
in
that's
Yahtzee.
rough. Get the egg timer.
Oh, yeah. Time left in the game. You only get to roll so many times.
Yeah.
See that little gulf in the middle? That's because of the bonus between the top of the sheet and the bottom of the sheet. So you're either going to get that bonus or you aren't.
The bonus is really important.
You're unlikely to get scores that are in between those two peaks. But really what Yahtzee is giving the player is a curve like that whether they realize it or not, they are just sort of tuning and riding, and that is what Yahtzee actually is. Your brain is sort of building a shape that looks like that even if you can't see it.
Yep.
That's why you can play Yahtzee without doing much math in your head.
My pro tip for Yahtzee is at the top of the sheet, you got to get the bonus. And in order to get the bonus, you need 3 1s, 3 2s, 3 3s, 3 4s, 3 5s, 3 6s. So like, let's say you only do 2 1s, we got to make that up with like an extra 2 or an extra, right? It's like, oh, I got 4 6s on the top of the sheet. That means I can go down, I can only get 2 3s and 2 2s and a 1, and that's cancels out 6. But that's the number you have to hit. And
I'll
if you
pretty
don't
much
get,
always burn my ones.
If you don't get the bonus, you're going to lose.
So think about that curve. We're going to come back to that curve in a minute. Yahtzee can be looked at as one mechanic, I think, because in your brains, think about when you play another game. And in that other, much more complicated game, there's a sub-game, and you're like, oh, that's just a Yahtzee. Like, you play Yahtzees inside of other games. So your brain treats Yahtzee like one mechanic. But Board Game Geek says that Yahtzee uses the mechanic called re-rolling and locking. Therefore, it is also a roll and write. It is a roll and write where you use re-rolling and locking to decide what you are allowed to write.
Yeah,
So-
not all roll and write games have the rolling and locking. Some of them you just roll and you write, and there's no, you can't, and everyone looks at the same thing.
So Yahtzee could be looked at as being two different mechanics that are independent of each other. But what's fascinating is that people who are good at Yahtzee do not think about it this way. Thinking about it this way doesn't really help you that much because analyzing those two other mechanics, they are so much simpler. You're going to do better by analyzing the mechanic as a whole, because if you get good at the mechanic as a whole, you are now good at any game that includes any combination of these two mechanics.
Right. And the thing is, just because a game mechanic has components that are themselves game mechanics doesn't mean that it is somehow not a game mechanic, right? It's the same way that, like, oh, well, food can be made of other food, right? A sandwich can have a piece of cheese on it, but a piece of cheese is still food, and a piece of cheese on a bread is still food, and it's the same thing. Re-rolling and locking is a game mechanic, even though that could be a component in building Yahtzee. Yahtzee can still be a game mechanic, even though it's a more complex one.
Is a hot dog a sandwich? Probably yes. But if I say, hey, would you like a sandwich? And then I hand you a hot dog, you're probably going to think there's something wrong with me. So single mechanic games are effectively, or mechanics, game mechanics, they are the atoms of games. That's just the level you're looking at. So if you understand a mechanic and then you understand another mechanic and a game is composed of these mechanics, then you can understand the behaviors of that game intuitively. If you zoom out further, complex games, that's chemistry. Games are just the chemistry of game mechanics. And the cool thing is, really simple mechanics combined together lead to extremely complex games.
I mean, you saw how much the complexity increased when we just took the re-rolling and locking and the roll and write together, and you got several probability charts just for a game that's probably too boring for most people to waste MAGFest time playing.
Now, thus, you could say the definition of a game is the same definition as the definition of a game mechanic. A set of procedures that are facilitating tests that have inputs and outputs. It's just the outputs of one mechanic are now the inputs of another mechanic. And sometimes those might split and diverge. You could draw a graph of the inputs and outputs of everything that happens in any board game you play. And the funny thing is, it's pretty arbitrary how you draw that. But practically, you know the names of a lot of game mechanics. So if you want to analyze a game, use the names you know, treat those as chunks, and only worry about the interactions between those chunks. Now, we gave another talk, so we're not going to dwell on this. But if you zoom all the way in, beyond the mechanics, we've got those tests. There are only a small number of tests, like 5 or 6.
Yeah, it's like
randomness.
random games, arbitrary games, right? It's like there's actually, when you really break games down as far as you can possibly break them down, it's like all games, really, there's only like 5 different games or so, a very small number of games. Right, and it's like, yeah. For practically speaking, it's like, yeah, is StarCraft the same game as Red Alert or Command and Conquer or whatever? It's like, no, those are different games, but they're both RTSs. And when you break them down, it's like you take away the themes, especially, which we're not considering themes at all. Themes have nothing to do with
Games
game
are just
mechanics.
math to me. It's just matrix.
Right.
I don't
If
care
you
what
look
the
at the
theme is.
math only, right, it's like, well, some of the numbers might be different, but all the formulas are really, really similar, if not identical. And you end up there being only a very small handful of games in the world.
So 5 or 6 tests combined together turn into thousands of game mechanics, and then thousands of game mechanics, they're all very simple. Combining those together make Twilight Imperium. So that is a good framework to use when you're thinking about and trying to understand games as a designer or a player. So back to that chart. Not to get into quantum theory, and I'm not pretending. You know what I know
You
about quantum
watch too
theory?
many PBS videos.
I
That's
watch
what you did.
way too many PBS spacetimes. But wave functions, ultimately, all a game mechanic is kind of like a wave function that the players get to use and navigate. And games are just combining those together. That chart at the top is just a combination of a bunch of simpler charts at the bottom. You can do math to analyze games and game mechanics. You can do statistical math to analyze, do playthroughs of existing games, to understand those probability curves and draw them, and then you could use those to better understand how the games go. But I doubt any of you are going to do that, and I certainly have not done that for anything other than trivial games. So, what are we talking about then? What really is a game mechanic if we step away from the math? Naming something is really important, because when you name it, you will recognize it in the future. Our brains are really good at recognizing patterns. Our brains are really good at using heuristics to interact with the world. So once you identify a mechanic, whatever it is to you, and you see it over and over again, you give it a name, you'll start to think about it, you can add your knowledge to it, and that will make it easier for you to think about more complex things that are higher up on the chain.
Yeah, it's all about abstraction, right? It's like, this is what I do. Like, if you're a software engineer, right? It's like everything is abstraction. You have a system, and it's a complex system, right? Think about, I don't know, an engine in a car, right? An engine in a car has got pistons and fuel injection and a drive shaft. I don't even know that much about engines, right? There's a lot going on there. And you could look at any individual component and see all the little different things going on. But by having the word engine, you can take all that complexity and your brain can just think of it as, oh, machine where fuel comes in and spinning comes out. And you don't have to think about all of the details when you think about engine. Right? And so when you name a mechanic in a game and you think about a Yahtzee, you don't have to think about all the math inside the Yahtzee. You can conceptually think of, the Yahtzee. Yes, it's where dice comes in and points come out.
I've definitely taught people games where I'm teaching the rules at some point, and this part's just a Yahtzee with 3 dice, and then I just move on. I don't say anything else about that part of the game. So in tabletop, what does naming a game mechanic do? 1, it gives the player intuitive expectations. Think of way back to that worker placement thing. Action draft versus worker placement. I could think a real world analogy. If I have a worker and I send them out to do something for me, they're going to either do something for me out in the world, pull a lever, or they're going to come back with my burrito. That's what they're going to do. I send the worker out, they come back with the burrito. So I can think about the game in terms of, I have these people I can send out to do things for me.
Right, we have action drafting, but by using the metaphor of the worker being placed, it becomes easier to think about for a human being with that metaphor of the human being doing work or the meeple doing work.
Yep.
Whereas if you think about action drafting, that might be too abstract for a person to really understand what that is if they don't become some kind of gaming pro.
Think about abstract games. You ever played Go? Teaching Go takes a while to get to the point where you start to see the intuitive nature of it, because there are very few intuitive heuristics you can just explain from day one. Mm-hmm. It gives you a common lexicon. If I say that's a Yahtzee and I say that's a worker placement, other people who use that same terminology will have an easier time understanding the game that we're playing together. They also have common characteristics. Most worker placement games function broadly the same way. Think about all the worker placement games you can possibly think of. Think about the ones that let you get another worker. and how crazily powerful that usually is. If there's a worker placement game and you can get more workers, it is almost always a great idea to do so.
Right, so you play one game and you see, getting a new worker. And then you go to another game and you see, well, does this one let me get a new worker or not? Oh, I see that it does. And now, even though you've never played this game before, because you understand that it's a worker placement game and you understand what it means to get a new worker, you already know not just how to play this, you know the strategy just because someone told you the name of the mechanic in the game.
Yep. Now, for a designer, the same thing. If you were designing a game, a lot of Kickstarter games fail in this regard because they have a bunch of cool mechanics, but playtesting is very hard. And when they launch the game, there's almost always some degenerate strategy, some problem with the game. Like if you just hammer the gold button, you'll always win no matter what. Like that kind of thing happens. The not fun part of the game becomes the important part. It's really hard to playtest complex games. But if your game is designed as a series of discrete mechanics that interact with each other, you can playtest them all individually. And then just like in software development, you only have to worry about where the mechanics interface with each other. You don't have to test the entire game every time you change one part of the game.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you can see that, oh yeah, this part of the game isn't working, if it's like this named mechanic, you can understand and mentally compartmentalize that part of the game and remove it and swap it out for something else. Whereas if you're thinking about the whole game in a non-abstract way, as every single piece, it becomes much harder to see where the lines are, and what can be removed and replaced.
It also lets you be clever. More recent worker placement games, designers recognize getting another baby in Agricola is way too powerful. So well-designed worker placement games have focused on making getting another worker not the only optimal strategy.
Or not possible at all.
Not possible at all is a good option too.
Yeah.
And the last one, whatever terminology the game designer is using, they are telling you how they want you or expect you to engage with their game. Think about how you read the rules. A game that describes the actions as worker placement is telling you about the inner universe of the designer. So now, we spent about half our time laying this foundation of what the hell is a game mechanic. The rest of this talk, we are going to go through a whole bunch of specific game mechanics that we think are interesting, worth discussing in some detail. Push Your Luck is a game mechanic that is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I mean, Can't Stop is one of the best ones, right? But a Push Your Luck game is all about, we're going to gamble and see who gets lucky, right? But if you haven't lost yet somehow, you can basically try and, have worse odds, but still somehow achieve victory. Your odds keep getting worse, but your rewards keep going up.
Think about in hockey, pull the goalie. That is unlikely to work, but right. You know what? High risk, high reward. You got to score 3 points because you're the Rangers.
Right, and the thing that's really fun about Push Your Luck games is that you're never really eliminated. It's like, I'm losing this game of football, but I can try the onside kick, right? Yep. It's like, Rim's got all his guys right at the end of the Can't Stop. He's going to win next turn. I can just never stop rolling, and if I get extreme luck and I don't chicken out, I could theoretically win Can't Stop in one turn.
And I point out the shape of Can't Stop is very similar to a chart we saw earlier. Push Your Luck games are direct, ride a probability curve. But instead of Yahtzee, which could be framed as a Push Your Luck game, just in a very abstract way, Can't Stop is saying the only decision you make every turn is, do I push harder or do I consolidate my gains? That's the only decision you're actually making. You are making that same decision in Yahtzee, just in a very different roundabout way, and it's not useful to think about Yahtzee that way. These games tend to be high drama. They tend to be very fun. They keep all the players engaged. There's a lot of reasons why this is a good mechanic to put in your game. Bag drama. What's in the bag? This is one of my favorite things in games. Not a lot of games do this. More games should. Imagine a game where at some point you're putting different colored cubes in a bag. And then there's a point later in the game where someone has to reach in the bag and pull some cubes out. And depending on what cubes they pull out, things happen in the game. This is a really elegant mechanic because it gives you some interesting inputs and outputs for the players.
Especially if you let some games, the bag is sort of preset, like you know what's in the bag at the beginning, or maybe you don't. Maybe it's random what's in the bag at the beginning. But I like it the best when players fill the bag and then empty the bag, right? The only thing that becomes a little dangerous in these games is the drama can actually sort of get weak towards the end when the bag doesn't have much left in it, and sort of like if everyone knows what's left in there. But the drama could also be high at the end if it's like, okay, if you know, okay, the whole rest of the bag is black cubes, big deal, boring. But if the rest of the bag is like a black and a white and a pink, and you really need pink, the drama is suddenly through the roof.
Now, the fun part is there's a concept, people call it different things, but hidden countable information in games, meaning there is some information that is hidden in the game, like there's no counter showing you the number, but if you're paying attention even a little, you know that number. You know how many pink cubes went in the bag. Hidden countable is often not a great mechanic because it is rewarding memory on top of the more interesting things you could be doing in the game. But if a bag drama is included in a game, hidden countable is usually fine there because the bag drama is not the be-all end-all of the game. The game is more about you are juicing the probability curve by putting things in and taking things out of the bag. The game's around manipulating the curve, not around riding the curve. And it becomes a very different experience in your brain.
I wonder why psychologically people hate I think most people don't like memory tests, right? But it's like there's no I guess empirical reason why a memory test would be less fun than a test of strength or something.
Well, I think about that play test of, I think it was Halo way back. There's an anecdote where in the play testing, they had a sniper rifle and all the play testers were saying sniper rifle's too weak. And to fix that, they just made the sniper rifle sound louder and people stopped complaining. So it can be really psychological. The same game with a slightly different theme, but the same math, players will react to it very differently, I found. Memory specifically, what I find is some people don't pay attention when they're playing. We're really like hardcore.
I think it's just a lot of effort when it's like how you're trying to memorize all the cubes in the bag. Like, okay, the bag has 5 black cubes and 4 white cubes and 2 pink cubes.
Well,
Now, okay, 2 cubes just got added to the bag, so now it's 5 black cubes. Right? It's like that is just not fun for some reason.
Well, think about trick-taking games. We're playing hearts. I'm sure some of you have played hearts at some point.
There's
It's like
52
spades.
cards to remember. You got to remember, okay, how
So
many spades?
when I'm playing hearts, I remember which hearts came out,
I remember, did the Queen of Spades get
Yeah,
played
did the
already
Queen
or
of
not?
Spades come out?
And who got it?
but I'm not counting every diamond that I could have counted.
No.
If I did that, I would be slightly better at the game, but it's not worth it because of diminishing return. I think people don't like games where extreme memory, like memorizing every card that's left in a 52-card deck, is required to win the game. Deck building. It is noteworthy to me that Kalis, the first worker placement game, still arguably is probably the best pure worker placement game.
I don't know if it's
in
the
my
best,
opinion.
but it's quite good, right?
I played it again recently. It's better than I remembered.
Yeah, it's a very good game.
Dominion, I still think is the best pure deck building game. It was the first one, and it introduced every concept just about that we
I don't know
have.
if it was literally the first one, but it's effectively the first one. The
Yep.
first one that mattered, the first one that was a big deal. And it's, you would think that like the first of a game that like people who came later would develop and figure things out and improve upon it, right? And like, it's like, Dominion gave us the idea for deck building, but actually we learned from all playing Dominion a bunch of times that we can actually make it better this way and that way. And newer deck building games should be a lot better than Dominion, but they kind of aren't.
Yeah. And I think, interestingly, deck building and bag drama, mathematically identical. No difference between these at all. But deck building implies every player has their own bag. So deck building, what are you doing in a deck builder? You are using your tool, your wave function, and the whole game is not around playing the cards the right way. The game is around manipulating your deck to make it better, to then make the deck better faster.
Right. Your
Whoever
deck
gets better fastest wins.
Your deck is just a bag. You pull out of the bag, and then you get more things to put back in the bag, and then you pull out of the bag. Everyone has their own bag. That's all it is.
Tile laying, very popular, very common. A lot of the earliest German games that came over to the US, like Entdecker, were basically tile laying games. Tile laying is fun because one thing it does is usually these games are bound by actions. If it's a tile laying mechanic, you're doing something to bring tiles out. But if the game is primarily at its core a tile laying game, meaning that's the primary mechanic, then basically you are limited by the number of tiles you will get to play in the game. The game is basically saying you are going to construct the game over the course of the game, and every tile you place matters because that is 1/50th of all the decisions you get to make. Every tile you draw, that is like one tiny piece of input. They also tend to be quick because usually tile-laying games, on your turn, you draw a tile, or draft a tile, or do something with the tile, and then you play the tile, and then you make a decision about the tile. So the game can move pretty quick in a way that similar map-building games might move very slowly. Carcassonne is a pretty good game. I hope people have played Carcassonne. Tile-laying games can get very complex and very weird, but I've found that a lot of the lightest games that people enjoy the most that are sort of like fast and casual tend to be at their core tile-laying games. A lot of those games with like a pleasant fox sitting next to a cat in a ravine with a nice tree and a sun, all those board game boxes you see, all that, they're almost always tile-laying games in some fashion. I think that's for a reason. It's a very non-aggressive game mechanic.
Yeah. The thing to be aware of in a tile-laying game is that when you have more players, each player actually has less control, right? And it becomes a more random game, right? Because you're sort of stuck to the whims of, if it's 5 players, you're only controlling 1/5 of the game, effectively. And so 4/5 is just random as far as you're concerned, right? And the game will also be slower because you got to wait for 4 people before each turn. If there's only 2 people, it's the same game, but it's actually way less random because you just control half the game instead of controlling only 1/5 of the game. So only half of the things that happen are random as far as you're concerned.
A danger in tile-laying games, if you ever see a game that has a big tile-laying mechanic and it has a lot of rules that aren't intuitive, that are saying all the ways you're not allowed to place tiles, it's probably a bad game. You want a tile-laying game, let people do crazy stuff with the tiles, make it easy to place tiles, make the rules for tile placement very open, so the game is more creatively expressive for the players. I think the other thing tile-laying games do, because if you played Carcassonne and you're good at it, you can be a jerk in Carcassonne. You can attack other players pretty hard in Carcassonne, but I think because you do it indirectly by playing a tile, I don't think people react the same way as a war game where I directly attack Scott, even if mechanically it's the same. I think there's a little bit of an ego buffer in a tile-laying game as a result. Anyone play Balatro? Anyone play poker? Ever heard of poker? It's a game.
You definitely should be playing some poker because poker appears in many other games, just like Yahtzee appears in many other games, right? I mean, we played The Gang, which is if you haven't played The Gang, you got to play The Gang, which is basically just co-op poker, right? It's like you're not trying to get the best hand, you're trying to figure out who has the best hand. But it's basically a set building thing. There is some, group of predetermined sets and you are trying to achieve one of them, and some of them are better than others, right? If you look at Mahjong, what's Mahjong? Mahjong is a rummy poker kind of situation. I guess if you're playing Jewish Lady Mahjong, where every year they print out a card and the card says, these are the Mahjong hands and this is how much they're worth, right? And it's like, well, those are the poker hands, that's how much they're worth. And you do a rummy style game and you're trying to achieve one of the hands. In poker, well, you just sort of do a random deal and you try to achieve one of the hands.
What I like about poker, what it's doing is it's almost versus probability curve with hidden in asymmetric information. If you're playing like Texas Hold'em, you all each have your own probability curve of the best poker hand you're likely to get, and you're trying to project for all the other players based on what you know, what could they have based on their behavior. It's like versus statistics, but the genius of poker. Think about how many different pokers there are. They all use the standard 52 card deck, which means everyone already knows what's in that deck. You can sort of skip past that. If you make a game that's like poker, but doesn't use the standard 52 card deck, there's a whole barrier to entry for people to even pay attention to your game. Poker using this standard deck is a big part of what made poker so popular.
Nice. Just by saying the word poker, you just automatically get this whole thing, right? Just like by saying the word Yahtzee, you get this whole mechanic for free. No one has to learn anything, hopefully. They already know what's going to happen.
Of course, we've had a lot of situations recently where we're playing a game like, oh yeah, it's like poker, and they've never played poker before. So they're trying to make a straight, like from a 2 to an ace, back around, like they just don't know how poker works. And I realized it's hard to teach poker because I know poker. Like I learned it from my grandpa when I was like 5, I guess.
Yeah. All right.
Drafting.
So I think the thing with drafting is there are drafts all over the place, and people don't recognize drafts when they're not named draft, right? So you think about in sports, you have a draft. It's like, okay, we're going to take turns picking human beings of a certain age, and then if we pick them, we have the exclusive right to them, and you pick an order. But it's like, well, there's a lot of other drafts that are called drafts. Imagine the Gathering draft. You have a hand of cards, you take one, you pass it to the next, right? That's called a draft. But if you play Sushi Go, that's just a drafting game. If you play Seven Wonders, that's just a drafting game. When you play Puerto Rico, you're drafting the actions. There's drafts all over the place that those instruction books do not use the word draft when they could.
I think draft is interesting because drafting is really fun. I think that's why there are so many games that are basically just drafting over and over again. They're light, they're quick, and you're all making decisions simultaneously. A lot of the ways drafts can go allow for simultaneous decision making among players, which makes the game move faster. The death of many games is when you're sitting there and you cannot think more about the game until it's your turn. So as a result, the game's going to take forever. Seven Wonders, the only reason that game is playable is because everyone's thinking at the same time.
Yeah. But yeah, a draft is just sort of a semi-fair way to distribute resources, but you still have some input to choose and some will to impart as opposed to just a random distribution. And it's also, the distribution is not necessarily based on how many resources you already have, like an auction, right? In an auction, someone with a bunch of money can just win the auction. In a draft, it's like, okay, everyone's mostly on even footing. Maybe someone goes first, but whatever, right? Mostly even footing. We're going to distribute the resources, but you have some say in what resource you get as opposed to just ending up with something.
I'd say that's a good point. The specific difference, I think, is in a draft, you only have to evaluate the thing that you want that is more valuable than the other things. You don't have to determine how much more valuable things are. You don't have to rank it. I don't have to decide that hockey player is worth $500 versus $50. I just have to say that hockey player is better than all the other options I have.
Right.
Or that hockey player is one I don't want Scott to have.
Right. It also helps to do a draft when you're considering things might have different values to different people. It's like, well, I value this one more. My team has like no defense. I need defensemen, right? I'll draft a defenseman. Even though this, you could argue whether the defenseman I drafted is better than the goalie Rim drafted or not. But it's like, well, Rim doesn't have any goalies, so it's okay, right?
Now, one thing I find fascinating about drafts, a lot of games have some asymmetric stuff at the front, like here's some bonus cards, or hey, you choose this race and you choose this other race in some fantasy game, or like the different galactic civilizations, and they're asymmetric. And a lot of times they're not perfectly balanced because that's almost impossible. So a lot of times, if there is a game that isn't necessarily symmetrically fair in a reasonable way, even if it's not in the rules, you'll either find player groups will draft for those things before they play the game, or the game will have an advanced mode that usually just says draft for those things, then play the game. That's really common in game design these days.
We talked about action drafting, right? You're just drafting what you're going to do on your turn.
Yep. But I think what's interesting about action drafting specifically is supposed to worker placement, because this is more choosing what I'm going to do in a game. Usually this kind of draft, if it's not the game itself, is to decide some resources we'll have that we then use for the rest of the game, versus every round we are deciding what we do or in what order we do things. It's a very powerful mechanic where someone decides what they're going to do because they prioritized it, but then everyone else gets to do the same thing, but weaker in some fashion. That's a really common mechanic you see across a lot of games.
Puerto Rico does that, but you don't have to have that for action drafting, right? You could just say, well, I choose that I'm going to go swimming. It's like, well, you can't go swimming now. What are you going to do? I guess I'll go mountain climbing.
Yep. Action points are similar to action drafting. Like, all these things overlap, like we said. But what I like about action points, what if the builder is just better than the captain in some fundamental way? Action points give you a fun way to have a bunch of different actions where you can choose, do I do a bunch of small things on my turn, or do I do one big thing? It lets you have crazy stuff that players have access to, and they have to pay accordingly for it. But instead of paying a currency, they are just paying what percentage of their turn do they allocate to this.
Right. If you think about it, action points in this game, which is to call, right? You get 10 points, and you can just look at this and already know the rules of this game. It's like those are the actions you can choose. The action of put dude into tent only costs 1, so you could do that 10 times. The action put dude onto a temple is 5 points. You could do that 2 times, or you could do temple once and 5 tents, or any combination thereof. Right? It's immediately obvious how this works, and it's not drafting because you're not denying someone else. Right? It's like, well, everyone could just do 2 dudes in a temple on their turn, and everyone spent 10 points, and you're good to go. What's interesting is that this appears in other places, and people don't. This is the easiest way to think of this mechanic, but people don't always think of it this way. In Magic the Gathering, when you spend mana to play cards, this is what you're doing, but you don't think of it this way, right? It's like, I could summon a guy for 2, right? Because it's not this menu, but your hand is basically a menu, just like this menu.
All right, here's a fun one. Has anyone played a game that has a rondel in it?
Okay.
Mostly people we know. Rondels are still pretty rare. There's this one designer that has 3 games that all use rondels, and I think that's like the majority of all the rondel
One
games
of
I've
these,
ever seen.
this is one of the rondel games they made.
I think this is Antique. I forget which
think
one's
it's
which.
Antique, yeah.
I think this is Antique.
Antique, I don't know how to pronounce it.
How a rondel works. This is usually used as a way to decide what actions you can take in a game.
So it's sort of like drafting, but not.
But you move a set number of spaces or a limited number of spaces. So sometimes it might be like every turn I can move my piece between 1 and 3 spaces.
So if you're the red, you last turn you did the know-how action. Next turn you can maneuver or iron or temple because you're going clockwise. You can't gold next turn; it's too far away. You can only move 1, 2, or 3 spaces.
So let's say the following term I really want arming because I want to go attack Scott. I have to pick temple to get far enough around the rondel to next turn go the rest of the way around the rondel. Right. This forces players to telegraph what they're going to be doing, which lets other players try to react and respond to that in a really abstract, elegant way.
Right, and let's say I want to do temple and iron, but for some reason I really wanted to do temple first. Well, that's a shame because that means you have to jump over the iron and go all the way around, and you can't do the iron again for like 2 or 3 turns later, right? The game is constructed in such a way to not let you do temple, iron. You have to go, dang, I have to skip over the iron.
Yep. And notice too, maneuver is on that rondel twice. So that is either an action that isn't as important, or it might be a sort of like housekeeping action. And you play like big complicated war games where like you have turns where you're doing real attacks and real assaults. And then you have turns or actions where you're just like consolidating your troops or like moving some things around to like set up for the next thing.
Yeah, this game is cleverly constructed because no matter where you are, you can always pick maneuver as one of your actions because you can move 3 spaces unless you just picked maneuver and you're standing on maneuver. You can't do maneuver twice in a row. They didn't need to write a special rule in the rule book like you can't maneuver twice in a row because the rondel just doesn't let you. You could never move 4 spaces to do maneuver. But if you're on any other space besides maneuver, you can reach maneuver with 3 moves.
If you're a game designer, I highly recommend figuring out how to use rondels because they're not used enough and they're a very elegant game mechanic. If you're a player and you encounter a rondel, get slightly good at modulus math and you will be really good at games that have rondels. And then you'll find out that there's hidden rondels in a ton of other games, and modulus math will make you crazy good at a lot of games. And if you don't know what modulus math is, I don't know what to say. Auctions.
All right, we're talking about auctions a little bit when we were talking about drafting, right? But an auction is a test of how many resources do you have? People with more resources are just going to be able to win at auctions, right? It doesn't matter your skill or talents. If there's an auction for a Van Gogh, a rich guy is going to beat me because he will bid more money than I have, right? But the other test of an auction, the real test, especially in games where there isn't going to be such extreme wealth inequality, like in the real world, is your ability to determine the true value of a thing, right? It's like when you're playing Monopoly, and it's like, yeah, things have prices on them in Monopoly, but it's like, how much is St. James Place actually worth, right? Are you overpaying with 500? Are you underpaying with 100?
Now, I would say you almost can't overpay for St. James Place because that is statistically one of the best possible things you can have in Monopoly.
But you have to know that, right? It's a test of your knowledge, and not just, there could be some knowledge elements of the things you know or don't know, but also your ability to evaluate the situation and determine how much value something has in terms of another thing, right? How many A's is B worth? And that is very difficult for a lot of people, which is why a lot of people get ripped off when they go shopping.
Now, we're not going to go too deep because if you are interested in this topic, we just gave a talk at PAX West called Auctions and Bidding. It's an hour-long talk just about auctions. Fully, that's all we talk about.
There's a lot to talk about with
But
auctions.
the biggest danger of auctions are extremely powerful to the point that most games either are an auction if they include them, or the auction overpowers the rest of the game. And Monopoly is the best example of this. Most people who play Monopoly remove the auctions because they're usually playing with kids. And kids are bad at math and things.
Adults are too.
Oh, everyone is. We'll get to that. So if you play Monopoly with auctions, anyone who is not very good at auctions just will not win. And if you are even slightly better at statistics and valuation and auction mechanics than the other people at your table, you have a very high percentage chance of winning Monopoly. And I cannot stress enough, that is Monopoly, the most random BS game in the world.
Right.
Nobody should play Monopoly.
If you're playing a good auction game, like Modern Art, the game that's pictured here, if you're good at auctions and the other people aren't, you will just blow them away, right? Auctions are like an extreme skill test where if the players do not all have the skill or do not all lack the skill, the people who understand what's going on and can evaluate things properly will just destroy everybody else.
Hidden movement, not used that often in tabletop because it is a pain in the ass to make happen safely. Notice, I don't know if any of you ever played Clue 2 or even knew that there's a Clue 2. Clue 2 is a game where there's a thief who is moving around on a piece of paper behind a screen trying to steal paintings. And all the other players are security guards trying to catch that thief. And the game is not good. It doesn't work. It's mathematical. It's got a lot of problems.
Scotland Yard is better, but even Scotland Yard has problems.
In fact, there's even a typo like on the sheet, so the game has a problem. But the problem with hidden movement games is that you need to figure out an elegant way to make the game proceed without players making errors. Many of us will make mistakes in games. I made a mistake in the game we played with our friends earlier today, and I got corrected. We watch each other, and if someone makes a mistake, we can sort of point it out, like, oh, you took too many victory points. You took too many victory, Raimi, you keep taking too many victory points, put that back. But if you're playing a game where not every player sees every action every other player took, it doesn't matter, forget cheating, no one's trying to cheat. If the player playing the thief makes a mistake, no one will be able to point that out, and the game will be fundamentally broken. You can't help each other out if actions and movement are hidden. That's why it's so hard to put this in tabletop games.
And this is why hidden movement is great for video games, where the
Yes.
computer can ensure that nobody's cheating.
If you want to see the most elegant hidden movement I think I've ever seen in a tabletop game that doesn't involve writing with dry erase markers on something, it is a game called Fury of Dracula.
You can still mess that up, though, but they have a rule in the rule book that says if Dracula is caught messing up, then this is what you do. Dracula gets very punished. And if Dracula isn't caught messing up, that's okay. And that actually makes it more fun because now Dracula can try to cheat on purpose, and as long as they get away with it and no one ever finds out, all good. I'm a vampire. It's
Just
fine.
like in hockey, if the goalie if the ref doesn't see you with that slash, you get away with it. That's part of the game.
You can
now.
cross-check if the ref doesn't call it on you. It's fine.
This is in most of the games you play, but a lot of people don't think about it. You know, you've got an economy of passing around cards, victory points, resources, whatever. Information is a currency and a commodity in games, especially certain games that prioritize it. Res Publica and Hanabi are two games that are explicitly about information economies.
Most games, either everything will be secret, right? Like in poker, you don't show your cards to other people, right? It's just secret. And other games, everything's public. Like, yeah, you can just look at a chessboard and see everything. There's nothing hiding there, right? You can't be like, don't know where my queen is, bro. Watch out.
The double queen has emerged.
Yeah, it's no secrets hiding in there, right? These are games where it's like, on your turn, do this to reveal a card to someone else, right? You teach someone else, if something's hidden, but someone takes a specific action and they learn a specific piece of information. It's part of the game.
Think about games where you have some social deduction. All those games like Battlestar Galactica, Shadows over Camelot, where there's a traitor and then other people are trying to play the game legit, and you can't talk about your hand, but you can kind of talk about your hand. Like, you can't say, I got 3 2s in my hand, but you'll be like, I'm feeling pretty confident about the 2 round. 3 times today I had to go to the bathroom. Like, that sucks. Hanabi, you have to spend an action. And if you spend that action, you are allowed to tell one player one thing about their hand because they can't see their own hand. Their hand is like on their forehead. So you spend an action to share information with another player. That is an information economy. Endgame scoring is in a lot of, especially like German crunchy games. You know, at the end of the game, you have your score, and then you see how many people had castles, and you count up the castle points. And then you figure out whatever complicated science scoring that nobody remembered how it went, and then your friend wins because they were the only one who knew how that scoring worked, and they bought all the science cards and 7 Wonders, and no one else did. Endgame scoring is in games because a lot of people do not enjoy playing a game where they realize early they are mathematically eliminated. Endgame scoring primarily exists to hide that information from that player so they will keep playing with you all the way to the end of the game.
Yeah, there's no reason you couldn't have the end game points like scored constantly and have the scoreboard reflect the end game scoring of the entire point. Like, oh, actually, Rim doesn't have 10 points. He has 30 points because you're not counting the end game scoring. You just keep him at 30 the whole time and adjust, right? Moving the scoring markers back and forth every single turn, but you don't. You hide these points until the end of the game in order to, I guess, make people do busy work.
Or in some games, Carcassonne does it well, and there's a game called Hansa Teutonica, which I highly recommend. It was really popular at MAGFest like 10 years ago. That's where we learned
Really
how to play
popular,
it.
meaning 2 tables are playing.
It was hard to get because it had just come out. But these 2 games both do a thing where endgame scoring broadly requires you to make investments now that reduce your options for the rest of the game. So as a result, you're now doing something more interesting. You're always deciding, am I going to prioritize having flexibility and getting points, or am I going to lock in much larger rewards but telegraph that to the other players and reduce how much bushiness or how much interaction I have with the game now?
Right. We got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, good.
Remember Fury of Dracula? A lot of games could do this, but don't. Think about what happens when you bump the table in a complicated game, the cubes move around, and you don't know where the cubes went. Now you're just effed. Like, the game's over. You can't correct that.
Unless you took a photo of every turn and you remembered where everything was and
Yep.
whose turn it. Sometimes you just forget whose turn it was, and it's like, whose turn was it? Uh-oh.
Whose turn was it? We do that a lot.
Yeah.
The best games either are designed to prevent you from making errors by having like a starting player token that you move around.
The best error handling worst game is cribbage, where you have 2 scoring markers, so you know what score you had, and you use the other one to go forward, but terrible game.
But the best tabletop games have rules for what to do if you effed up so you can continue playing the game.
Or at least they recognize through playtesting, these are things we effed up constantly, and therefore we will protect against, we'll either design so those things don't happen, or at least have some way to handle when they do happen, because they happen a lot.
Hockey has this. If we didn't have the penalty box, if I cross-check someone, what are they going to do? Call the police and the game's over? Like, what do you do? So instead, they have a rule. If you hit someone a certain way, you have to sit in a little box for a couple
what
minutes.
if we run out of goalies? What do? They have emergency backup goalie, right? They have a answer for everything. What do we do if all the refs are hurt? And the teams nominate players to become refs. It's in the rule book.
NHL hockey basically has rules of what if the entire world is nuked? The game will still happen somehow.
I think at some point the game does forfeit or stop playing.
There are forfeits, but most of the forfeits involve the arena no longer being safe for people to play and an alternate arena not being available.
Anyway.
In which case the home team loses.
As the home team, it's your responsibility to provide the field to play on that's adequate and safe.
All right, we're going to jump ahead to a couple more because we're running out of time, of course. We had a lot of game mechanics here. Some games, like the pokers, have the option of including real-life consequences.
Don't play if the real life consequences are dire.
Yep. Pendante. If you ever played Pendante, it's imagine if poker, the optimal strategy was not to fold 99.999% of the time. What if every hand was a crazy bluff and some nonsense going on? That is what this game is. It's like poker, but quicker and more fun.
You can also get a floosh.
You can.
Not a flush, a floosh.
But at the back of the book, they have this section that's like, hey, if you want to play Pendante for real money, here are the real money rules. I don't recommend you play that way.
Never do that.
But that is a game mechanic. Another game mechanic, College Humor did a show a long time ago. The show was called like Dire Consequences. And the first episode, two of the guys are in their Manhattan office. It's 1, 2, 3, they do rock, paper, scissors. Whoever loses immediately has to start walking to one of their grandparents' houses in New Jersey. It took him 2 days to walk there. So we talked about worker placement a little bit in the beginning. We'll end on trick taking.
Our favorite.
Trick-taking games are, anyone play trick-taking games like euchre and
Trick-taking
hearts and all
games
that?
are getting hotter these days, and hopefully they keep getting hotter.
There are so many trick-taking games coming out of Japan. Like, that is like the land of trick-taking right now. So trick-taking, fundamentally, what I think trick-taking is good at is being light enough to where you can socialize at the table, and you are socially deducing what other players are doing and trying to telegraph and hide moves and be tricky with each other. But they are serious skill-based games. They're like this perfect balance. They also take advantage of the same thing poker takes advantage of. They usually use either the standard 52-card deck or a weird special deck that is very simple and designed for that trick-taking game. Once you know how trick-taking works, you can learn any trick-taking game in like 2 minutes.
A lot of times you'll just sit down and be like, yeah, it's a must follow with 3 suits, 1 to 10, and you can't break trump until, right? You just say some simple words like that to people who are in the trick-taking know, and they know how to play immediately. You don't have to explain the whole rule book.
And then you can get fun stuff like someone who's played a lot of trick-taking games, there'll be games that do the opposite. Like in this game, you're not allowed to follow suit.
Yeah.
So over the last 59 minutes, where did we take you? We have a pretty simple for players. 1, don't get hung up on semantics and fiddly definitions. Nerds, we do this too much.
There's no such thing as a right answer. You waste your time.
Yep. If you care about games, when you play them, describe and interrogate the mechanics you see. Talk about them. Think about them. And if you want to be good at games, study the ones that you encounter the most often in the games you play.
Right. When you play a game, try to think about which mechanics are comprising that game, and then maybe pick one and get really good at that one, and then every time it appears, you get really good at trick-taking. Well, now you're just really good at all trick-taking games, even ones you've never played before.
And if you're a designer, you need to learn what different mechanics are good at doing in games. So you can design a game based on, these are the mechanics I want, because that's how I want my game to feel.
A good chef knows when to add sugar and when to add salt. You got to know, if as a game designer, is drafting the sugar or is it the salt?
Yep. You need to learn how to connect game mechanics together, because then your games can be designed in a very modular fashion. I think most of the people making Kickstarter games really need to learn this. And this is direct advice. If your game is complicated, you should only have one mechanic that is weird and new and different.
That's the thing that makes your game stand out. Otherwise, why are you making a game if it's just all cookie cutter pieces?
If you got a crazy draft, don't also have a crazy trick-taking thing. Only one weird thing. You're not Mozart. And if you are, then I really want to play your game. I hope this was enjoyable.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your MAGFest. And Emily and I, tomorrow on Saturday, will be talking about the art movement that we think is appearing post-postmodern that is uniquely juiced by video games.
If anyone wants a sticker with our logo on it, these stickers cost me $1 each. They will cost you $0, but you must tell me where you are going to put the sticker, and it better not be a place of vandalism. Otherwise, I will not give you one. The end.